So let's
Agreed.
get to our guest here, Renee.
Yes, let's do that, Jamie. Excited to welcome in today from Fox Sports, an MLB reporter, Deesha Thosar. Deesha, a Penn State alum. Lately, we've had a lot of Penn State alums. Our own producer, Tyler Zulli, is one. We've had some guests on that are Penn State alums as well. Welcome in. Now, I want to jump right in, Deesha, with asking you about the state of New York right now. The Yankees and the Mets, between the two, after having, as you're following both, what have been your thoughts on the moves that they've made and how both teams are trying to turn a corner this upcoming 2024 season?
Of course. Well, hey guys, thanks for having me on. Definitely, I think with the Yankees especially, they came out firing. To me, they really kickstarted the offseason. It feels like we've had this offseason for 5 years already, but really it just keeps dragging because there's so many players still left on the table. So it always makes me wonder if someone like Juan Soto was still available at this time, how much different that offseason picture would be. But of course, that's not possible because the Yankees went and got him right away, and he didn't spend too long on the market, and it does completely revamp their lineup. I am really looking forward to how he adjusts to New York. This has been a big talking point for the Yankees and Brian Cashman as they try to get players, is just sort of how will these star players adjust. Everyone thinks they're ready. Of course, a guy like Juan Soto, you sort of don't have any qualms about whether he can handle it, but I do think there's an added layer there that is unpredictable ultimately. So I'm looking forward to if he does hit his home runs to that short porch, if he struggles a little, just adjusting to that team. And of course, at the end of this season, whether the Yankees end up signing him long term and keeping him in New York, because Soto does become a free agent after this season.
Deesha, let's get to the real question here. Your thoughts on James Franklin?
I mean, I liked him when I was at Penn State, but I see that the tide has turned. But yeah, definitely the most important Penn State question. It's not expecting.
I know every
I'm
Penn Stater's
sorry.
got a stance on James Franklin. You know, great recruiter, just can't seem to put it together on Saturdays.
Oh, the Lord.
But in terms of the Phillies, Deesha, you're up there in New York. You know the Mets pretty well. What do you get the sense is their direction here? You know, they come in when Steve Cohen takes over and start writing big checks. They get rid of Verlander and Scherzer, and it looks like they're kind of resetting. Obviously, they get a healthy Diaz this year. Is next year another year where they're financially going to push all in? Are they going to assess their young players and hope it's enough to add to the core they have? Is Pete Alonso on the block?
Yeah,
Like, what is their general
definitely.
vibe?
Sorry. Yeah, I think definitely that's been the question for everyone in Queens, and sort of what are the Mets doing this season? And I think it hinges a lot, of course, on David Stearns and how they just plucked him from the Brewers. Uh, just even now, he's a guy that operates fully on, he needs to know everything. He needs to have no stone unturned, and it's impossible to do in just a first few months with a new franchise. So for him and for the organization and Steve Cohen too, in many ways, this is only his fourth year even owning the team. They need to find out more of what they're capable of as an organization, and that goes from players to staff to coaches, front office, everybody. So David Stearns is right now at this point where he's just analyzing the talent that he has, and I think from there the Mets will go forward. What they're hoping for is to be competitive with the roster they currently have, which is not a long shot. Like you mentioned, Edwin Diaz is coming back. That should really bolster their bullpen. Adam Ottavino re-signed, and they have the core in the lineup still going strong if everything works out. For Pete Alonso, Francisco Lindor, Brandon Nimmo, they have Francisco Alvarez, who could have a big year this year as he gets more settled into the big leagues. So they're hoping they'll be competitive and sort of reevaluate at the trade deadline to see if they will be buyers or sellers. I think even just the fact that that's a possibility for them to be buyers at the trade deadline, after the last couple of years that they've had of Scherzer and Verlander and then leaving and trading for Acuna's younger brother. I think it's a good spot for that organization to be, just among all that turnover, and that they still have a chance just to get into the playoffs. And we've seen in recent years what happens, of course, to teams like the Phillies when they get into the playoffs, even as a wild card team, and how successful that type of run can be. So it is a little bit of a mystery, I think, just up until the trade deadline. We'll sort of see how this team plays together for these first few months of the year.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the Mets just bring in Shintaro Fujinami, who inked that 1 year, $3.5 million deal. The Phillies, the Orioles, two teams that were allegedly finalists before he ultimately decided to try to restore New York, as he said. So right now, that's where the Mets are, in your opinion, in this restoration period. Is there optimism around that this plan of kind of, I won't say a rebuild, but a pivot is going to actually short term work? Because I know there's also been talk of waiting until next year, waiting until the 2024 free agent class, of bringing in maybe a Zach Wheeler, one of the big names that are possibly hitting free agency in 2024. Short term, long term, do you think the Mets have that optimism that they can get it done, whether it's the trade deadline or even waiting until after the season?
Yeah, I think ideally their roster and their talent and their farm system lines up for them to be extremely powerful next season. That is just on paper results. But having said that, I think this year they still have a chance. And a lot of this goes back to messaging. To go back to your point of our fans optimistic, the Mets have handled it very well. And that comes from David Stearns of having experience in how to put that messaging out there. Steve Cohen is also very careful since he took over of sort of what news he puts out and what leaks. Guess who doesn't run things that way? A team like the Red Sox, who are kind of in the same boat right now as the Mets, in that what are they doing? Fans are extremely angry at their team in Boston right now. And that sort of goes hand in hand with the messaging aspect. I think that's the problem in Boston. If the Red Sox had put out some sort of messaging that is similar to the Mets, and that, listen, we're going to be competitive. It might be a reset year, it might not. Let's just wait and see. The Red Sox are sort of stuck in that path of course, we're going all in. Meanwhile, they might finish last again for the fourth time in 5 years. So, in that way, I think the optimism from the fans comes directly from the top, and that starts with Steve Cohen, and he's had a handle on that ever since buying the club.
Yeah, this question's an interesting one because the Orioles obviously now we see have new ownership and new money coming in. They make the Corbin Burns splash almost immediately as a nice middle finger to the Angelos family. And then yesterday in baseball, the Kansas City Royals spend $278 million on Bobby Witt Jr. That could be a bargain, come 3-4 years from now if he stays on the trajectory he's on. Do you think there's maybe a turning of the corner for some of these smaller market clubs in terms of making bigger moves and trying to be players now? Or do you think this is just, the Orioles getting new money in and the Royals knowing they had to keep this kid?
I think it's a bit of both. I think definitely in the case of the Orioles, I can see this playing out exactly like the Steve Cohen situation in New York, in that they're going to have a long term fan buying the team, and that with a lot of money and just set to put those resources not only in the team but around Camden Yards and sort of bring up that entire development. And that's exactly what Steve Cohen is also trying to do. I think the fans could put a lot of faith in that. But then just talking about the Bobby Witt and Royal situation, that I think is really encouraging for small market teams just to give the fan base something to rely on. Now, this is a guy that they can count is not going to move. That's sort of how baseball used to be. At least for me growing up, it was these homegrown stars, sort of lifers that are going to stay with the team that they came up through. And I like that deals like this, long-term deals, kind of are pointing back in that direction. I think it just gives, especially small market teams that are always looking at teams like the Dodgers, the Yankees, the Red Sox, always in it through the end, the Braves now. And again, what Bobby Witt and that deal came to transpire is exactly what the Braves are doing with their young stars too, and look how well that's turning out for them. So I do think there is sort of a turn of the tide that just reinvigorates the fan base in as far as saving value for ownership and money spent and finances. I always think they have more money than they're letting on, and if it's a deal that makes sense for them, it's not my money. So I think it makes sense for fans in the end.
So, Deesha, you brought up Adam Ottavino a couple questions ago, and kind of a weird offseason for him. So, did he just misread the market, or can you kind of walk us through how that ended up happening, where he signs for less than his option was for?
Yeah, it's funny. I was at the New York chapter baseball dinner while he was a free agent for the first 2 hours of the dinner, and then he was with the Mets for the second half, and David Stearns and Adam Ottavino are sitting at that same long table. So it's like, I wonder how that deal came to pass. And as soon as I heard it, it was, I think Ottavino needs a new agent. I mean, he's been in this game so long. I really thought he was going to have a better deal than that. Really, I think he was also just as confused as the fan base at the end of last season of where would this team be this year. And as the pieces started to click, they started adding guys. They, of course, added pitchers. They needed to add pitchers. I think he also started to gain more confidence in the direction, and he's getting older too. He's nearing retirement. So he's not just going to kind of lays around on a team that is just not going to put all their chips in the basket. So in that way, I think he just got encouraged as the season went on. He does like New York. He's always liked it here, and it just kind of all fit into piece at that baseball dinner, which was funny to see.
That is actually really funny. But listen, Deesha, I always love to give an opportunity for us to have the discussion around projections because we know it's only February, but it's never too early to start giving those projections. The Yankees just picked up in a trade with the Dodgers, Caleb Ferguson. As you talked about, Juan Soto, one of the biggest names that we often forget that even happened this offseason that the Yankees picked up. So the Yankees specifically, where do they fall in your projections for the season overall? Do you see them as a team that can go the distance? I feel as though many are so stuck on talking about the Dodgers, rightfully so. Will the Rangers be able to run it back? Will the Braves, will this be their season? A team like the Phillies, of course. But the Yankees, I don't know that I hear enough of in those conversations with Aaron Judge and Juan Soto and obviously having already a very talented team. Where do you project them to land in this season in terms of top five, top grouping for the year?
Yeah, I think you made a really good point about the Dodgers being the talk of the town. I think that's really dangerous. And having covered Mets teams that had Scherzer and Verlander and that hype starting from the offseason, I think it's a really high tightrope to walk. So just with the Yankees, I think that has been their benefit this offseason, almost like this sleeping giant. And everyone forgot that they signed Soto to start the offseason. And more than what they've done this offseason and fill all their holes, they got Marcus Stroman. They definitely need another pitcher. I think what happened last season is very much festering in that Yankees organization. They are not happy with the results that they showed last year, and they're ready to make everyone forget and make that season an outlier. So I think they're going to come in hungry for that sake alone. And then, of course, having a star player like Juan Soto batting by Aaron Judge is going to be something we have not seen in this sport. I think it's going to be exciting. And we haven't also seen this Yankees team operate as an underdog. It's weird to even name them as that with the payroll that they have. It's like 300 million approaching that payroll, but they are in that way the underdogs of this offseason. So I think they're going to win the division. At least they're my pick to kind of win the AL East over someone like the Orioles, who will probably be right behind them. I think it'll be tight, but I think I'm expecting the Yankees to sort of return to that evil empire that the rest of the league can hate on this year.
I think that's good for baseball. I think having the Dodgers and Yankees as hateable teams is good for the sport, and it's good to see both of them being very hateable this year. All right, Deesha, last one for you, and we'll let you get on with your day. There's still some big name free agents out there. Mostly, I'm going to ask for your predictions. Cody Bellinger, Blake Snell, Jordan Montgomery, and Matt Chapman, if you're feeling like answering that one too. What's your prediction on where these three end as we're already approaching mid-February?
Yeah, it is bizarre that these guys are probably going to be unsigned as spring training starts. I'll give you a bold prediction, and then some of them might not surprise you. Starting with bold, I think Blake Snell will end up signing with the Yankees. It has just been rumored a little bit too long, and I also saw Snell and Cole chatting quite a bit, and for 3 hours at this baseball dinner, sitting next to each other. So that would be kind of surprising at this point, but also doable if they wanted to go really all in. Cody Bellinger, I still see ending up with the Cubs. I think Boras and his camp are still asking for way too much than the Cubs are willing to give. But I see them sort of meeting in the middle. Jordan Montgomery, also kind of boring answer. I think he ends up back with the Rangers. They definitely need pitching help, and it's curious that they've done nothing all offseason to sort of help in that department until guys like Scherzer and DeGrom come back. Matt Chapman, that's an interesting one. I feels like it's the market is sort of waiting until those first three sign. I've heard rumors of even the Mets wanting Chapman and how he could slide in as their third base solution. I don't know that will happen. I think the Mets seem to be done with their roster. So maybe the Blue Jays, maybe the Giants, maybe a West Coast team, maybe the Angels. But yeah, that one I'm not so confident about.